Welcome to the latest episode of CarePoints. I'm your host, Kenny Schiff, Chief Marketing Officer for Lone Star Communications, the Alero Solutions Group, and our latest family member, Promobix. Today's episode is part of my continuing series of conversations with my collaborators at Lone Star, customers, partners, and notable folks in the tech industry. Thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to another great conversation with my guest. Hey, everybody. I'm talking to our good friend, Dan Baxter, who is now the Chief Technology Officer for the Lone Star Communications family of companies, which includes Alero Solutions and Promobix. And what's great about Dan as he comes into the Lone Star family is that he has a legacy of bridging the gap between complex and real-world users across a lot of different things. And he has gotten to know Lone Star over the last few years in a consulting capacity as he worked for one of our partnering companies, Thortec Solutions. He's hands-on, but he's also very strategic. And he has deep experience in his background with cloud architecture, software development, analytics, and he has a reputation for building high-performing teams and delivering results. And he's the kind of tech leader who makes sure that tools actually work for people using them. And that's exactly why we're excited to have him on CarePoints. Good morning, Dan. Thanks for joining me today.
Morning, Kenny. Good to be here.
All right. So the folks at Lone Star and the broader world don't know much about Dan Baxter, so we're going to talk to you today about that. And so you're joining Lone Star as CTO, but you're continuing your role as Chief Architecture Engineer for Alero. Can you share what your day-to-day is going to look like balancing both those roles?
Well, it's kind of just balancing these two hats, if you will. There's the strategic hat, which is, kind of where we're, going into quarterlies and strategic planning meetings and things like that. And then there's also, that engineering hat where I actually do roll my sleeves up and write some code still on almost a daily basis. So it's going to be a balance of those two things.
And that fits well into the Lone Star legacy. We're about to enter our 35th year, and there's many people at the company who are those who roll up their sleeves and do the work, but have elevated themselves to thinking about how we can move forward as a business. So you're going to be mostly remote. And how do you like to stay connected and build relationships with your colleagues and that you don't see on a day-to-day basis?
I don't know. I think it's been pretty natural, to be honest. Like, I don't try to force anything like that. We are regularly in meetings, and we have a very loose vibe. I think we're all comfortable around each other, so it's just kind of been, a natural connection for me. And I think that's part of what drew me to the Lone Star family of companies as well, is that it was natural and we didn't have to force anything like that with these people.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that more, but yeah, I think that you were invited to join because it was a kind of a natural progression and a natural fit. So we want the people to know a little bit about you, where you come from, what your background is. So tell us about your path, what got you into technology in the first place.
It was just kind of one of those things that I was always drawn to. I remember when I was 5 years old, I was wowed by Nintendo, and then there was computers, because Nintendo is essentially a little computer anyway. And, coming from video games into programming, started programming kind of on my own, and I took classes in high school, and it became kind of apparent that I was talented at that. And then I ended up majoring in it in college. I majored in computer science in college. I did pretty okay there, and after college in computer science, I ended up laying carpet for a living for a year, and then I decided that wasn't for me. And I actually that was when I finally got into professional technology after college there. My father installed telephone wire, like he worked for the phone company Verizon, and my mother was a nurse. So partly to me, I felt like Lone Star was kind of like the intersection of those two things, and that was, I don't know, I guess it's a little bit romantic, but that was part of, I think the draw for me. It felt fateful.
So until relatively recently, Lone Star hadn't traditionally had a CTO, and then when Jeff Richard joined us, he that was a role he took on, and then eventually Justin took on that role. So, what excites you about stepping into this new role at this stage of our company's growth?
It feels like the ground floor, really. I mean, I see, a lot of the things that we have going, and I've been a part of Alero, I think, relatively since the beginning. I don't know how
Yeah,
long it
yeah,
was,
you were there even before Alero was Alero.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like that. We have the established side of things, but there's also a little bit of Wild West there where we are, doing new things and new technologies, and almost a little bit of a startup mentality. So being able to have the best of both of those things is really exciting to me.
Yeah, the startup. One of the great things about both Promovovics and Alero, from a Lone Star perspective, it was that we do get to have the best of both worlds. We have the solid foundation, mature company, so that things aren't crazy from a back end standpoint. There are processes and procedures and people in key roles in the company, but at the same time, both Alero and Promovics have an opportunity to sort of create a new world beyond who we've always been. So, from your perspective, what makes Lone Star and Alero a special place to work?
It feels like family and friends, I guess. Like it really it does. And I kind of knew it was the kind of place that I wanted to work before I worked there. And when I was just working with people, I think I've told that story. I was kind of in a position where, I couldn't because of, my status as, consultant and the relationship there. But when I could, I immediately made the call to see if there was a place for me there.
Yeah, and I think that you worked for Thortec for a bunch of years. We
Hmm.
had a close relationship from a Lone Star perspective, as did CareSite before. So this was kind of felt like a natural progression. And it's funny that you brought up the friends and family thing, because that was actually going to be my next question. So, we've started amongst us to really be talking about the Lone Star family of companies. So we have the
Hmm.
Lone Star family of companies and the Lone Star family of people. so, um, so you worked for a lot of cutting edge technologies. What's one technology trend that that you're personally most excited about?
I mean, this is not going to be a surprise to anybody, and it almost feels cliche at this point, but it is still AI. It might be for a different reason. The reason is because I don't know where it's going. I think there's a lot of people who say they know where it's going, but I I think we still have to prove the value. Like it is impressive, right? But there's a lot more value to be had that I think we don't know even how it is going to be applied. So it is still a frontier there, I think.
Yeah, and I think that in a business like Lone Stars, which inevitably has a physical, on-site, on-prem, basic set of things that it does, a lot of that stuff is just not going away. So we're in an interesting place in that we can start to think about how those things come together.
Yeah, yeah. I think the world is still figuring it out. There's a lot of people with very good, marketing behind them that will convince you that they already have the answers. But I think we're still figuring out real value, as far as like what's going to actually, change the landscape of things.
So Dan, Lone Star is celebrating its 35th year. So what does it mean to you be joining the leadership team during this milestone? And I'll throw in the whole employee ownership thing. So you could have worked for a lot of different companies, startups, private equity based, venture based companies. Lone Star is kind of different that way. Given the person of your background and where we're at, like 35 years is a long time. What
Hmm.
does that all mean to you?
I think I was drawn to it because it was different. It's I don't know how to describe it. Like, I think that that friends and family kind of theme, I'd go back to that, but the 35 years aspect of it just shows you that it works, right? And that's comforting that that this has been built up over that amount of time. And so we're standing on a strong foundation of how to make something that feels so good work and last. That's what I'd say about that.
Yeah, and Lone Star hasn't been afraid to reinvent or imagine how it might be in the future in a way that I
Hmm.
think some other companies may be stuck.
Hmm.
So having a CTO isn't typical for a systems integration company. There are technical lead people, engineering oriented people who have important positions at other systems integration companies, but we've made a choice to have a chief technology officer, which is inherently a kind of strategic position. Why do you think it's important, and what does this signal about where Lone Star is headed in that we've decided to invest in this role?
I think it's important because it allows you to be future thinking and then also adaptive. It's easy to get, to have so much success and then forget that the default nature of things is actually always change. I mean, you want to continue the core of things that work, the heart, but if you're not looking forward, it's gonna go away. So I think it is important, even from an existential, I guess, uh, um, line of thinking, but it's it's also going to help the company grow. I think because we are thinking about growth and strategy and things like that, which I think is great.
Yeah, there's an intent, overused word, but this is an intentionality. And I think we're at a place where we can really look much more specifically at the market factors, customer factors, the landscape of technologies that are out there, and actually be far less reactive and much more planful and proactive about where we want to be. And that's exciting to me. Let's shift a little bit, and since employee ownership, Lone Star became an employee stock ownership plan company, an ESOP, this year. And how do you see employee ownership shaping Lone Star's future, particularly in how we innovate and serve customers?
I think, and this is part what I believe of the intention of it. It is a ground up kind of strategy in wherein because people are incentivized now for the company to grow, they're now, you know, putting on that other hat of how do we make this better? How do we make this more efficient and things like that? I think aligning those incentives is incredibly important. And I think that when you have, you know, an entire group, an entire company of people that, are invested in it, that becomes really powerful because they're all aligned around the same end goal and makes it very clear.
And everybody can contribute. So, even from a technology standpoint, in 2025, we all are significant technology users. My
Hmm.
90-year-old mother is a regular technology user. So we all have ideas about things that technology can do for us. And everybody in the company, and we have a lot of different kinds of people, can have something to say that we would actually listen to.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it also it's a morale booster as well because this is something that inherently comes from the top and is thoughtful about everybody in the organization. So I've definitely seen some people rally around that too.
So, a theme for a company of our maturity, but also our progressive nature, is this intersection of legacy and future technologies. We work primarily in healthcare, but also in education. How do you see healthcare and education customers managing both stability and innovation at the same time?
Very carefully, I think, because you do have to respect systems that have been in place, for a long time, and there's also, all of the things that develop around the systems that you need to respect as well. So it requires a lot of planning to upgrade, even just one technology component. So from that perspective, you really need to analyze the ROI um, on new technology, and there's definitely, with targeted implementations and picking what you're working on correctly, you can still get that benefits of technology, but you really need to respect the systems in place, I think.
Yeah, customers make investments in the type of technology that a Lone Star and other companies like ours sell, and you can't walk in the door and tell them to just
Yeah.
throw it out, right? So,
Yeah.
and especially when we're talking about things like patient safety, um, threat management, and education, et cetera, there are foundational elements that are already there. So, an opportunity for us in general is to help the customer have a
Hmm.
pathway that, as you say, respects what they have and prepares them for where they want to go.
Yeah, and sometimes that means you don't necessarily upgrade a particular component, based on analysis. And sometimes it also means you're building, extra scaffolding around the existing thing, like an old building or something like that. You need to build supports, and you can, potentially build, new bells and whistles all the way over here, and it's all like built around that existing structure as well. And maybe someday down the line that gets replaced because now, you have different interfaces to things like that. But yeah, I look at it kind of like that.
So we've been in. So I've been at Lone Star. It's about to be 3 years, and cybersecurity is something we've always thought about, but we didn't get formal about it until really I joined the company. And now we have SOC 2 and are working on future certification and compliance going forward. So, and that's not just true of us, it's true of all of our customers as well. So cybersecurity is an important topic in the technology sector. What's your perspective on its role in systems integration and customer trust?
Yeah, it is. It needs to be ever present, right? And it needs to be baked into the culture, almost, if you will, of it. Especially, like, I'm coming at it from a development perspective. If you're developing something new, it needs to be built into that culture. And as far as customer trust, it's actually very helpful for customer trust, because a lot of cybersecurity is about promising things and being able to back up your promises with, evidence. So from that perspective, I think it is great. It can be challenging. It makes you can be looking at something, and it's like, oh, that's just 5 feet away, but no, you have to go the other way because you need to have the documentation and all of that other stuff in place. So that can be a little bit frustrating, but it it's for a good purpose, and it does help you, um, like I said, promise and provide evidence that you're keeping your promises.
Trust and verify.
Hmm.
So, so you and I have been in and around this stuff for a long time. And, 10, 15 years ago, it's not a conversation we would have led with. We would have prepared ourselves to answer if asked. So I think we're in the place where we might flip that conversation. And nobody is 100% locked down a fortress and completely secure, but we want to show people that this is part of who we are. You mentioned sort of embedding it into all aspects of what we do. So earlier on in the conversation, you talked about AI reshaping things and how exciting it is, but also how unknown it is. Um, where do you see the most significant opportunities for AI in our space? So healthcare and also education, both, but also internally. So, Lone Star has a lot of pockets of AI going on. I think we all do, sometimes unknown to us, but Lone Star is actually pretty intentional about it. So, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for us?
So currently, and this might change. So I will say that there's a lot of people who espouse the automaton version of AI where you just have, all these agents running around doing things and replacing people. That to me, I don't I don't think that's, tomorrow. Maybe down the line we can get to that point, but today and tomorrow, I'm more into the cyborg version of AI, where you're taking a person at the core and bolting on these capabilities to them that make them super. And I feel like that is where we've seen the most, value from AI. And so because right now where it's at, you can't really trust it, right? But you put a human in there that knows what they're doing and now has these tools, and the one thing they need to do is they need to take responsibility for the output of the tools. And when like, if you're just, you know blasting AI generated content out there, it's not going to work out well. But if you're using it as a tool and then you're curating afterwards, it is definitely a productivity boon now, and I think will continue to be.
Well, you and I have had a conversation, and several of us at Lone
Mhm.
Star have read the Jeff Woods book on AI leadership. And
Mhm.
I would say for me, the biggest takeaway from reading that book, and this is kind of an obvious concept, but an important one for me, is the notion of thought partnership.
Mhm.
So, which is really what you're talking about. And
Mhm.
so, whereby it's a dialogue, it's another way of getting other data points, and also a way to challenge any of us regarding, I think this. Can you test that argument for me? What a concept
Mhm.
that is. So Lone Star, for most of its 35th year, has been a supplier focused integrator. So a lot of who we are is based on uh, things that we got from other people. And that's will still be important. And that's an important part of what an integrator does. But we're shifting towards being a trusted advisor, thought leader. We're also shifting from being regionally focused, because that's the way that our integration model has been working, to one being national and potentially international. So, thinking ahead a little bit, what are your thoughts about who we are becoming beyond being a traditional integrator selling other people's stuff?
Oh, that's a good question. I see it as we've always had at our core. We're about helping the customer out, and I feel like we found a new way to help out, and we found, you know, new gaps. And I think some of it has been, comes from feeling maybe even a little bit hamstrung by a box that we might have been in before, and then now once we move over here to where we can start building things and using the knowledge that we've had and the relationships that we've had and the communication that we have to directly, create things that could help somebody out better. I think that that's kind of where we're going.
So the table is set. We're going to continue to do many of the things that we've always done, but we have much more talent and capabilities than we had before. So that when somebody asks us for something that we may not have been able to do in the past, we can say yes in a way that we may not have been able to before.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that that's at least through what I've seen, that's ingrained into the culture. There's so many people that work for the Lone Star family of companies that are so focused on the customer and really wanting to solve their problems. And this is just a new way. There's so many more things that we can do for them.
So we're entering fall here in New England. So we're thinking about what the rest of Q4 will be like, and then I'm doing a lot of work right now on thinking about 2026 and beyond. So what are you excited about in 2025 and 2026 from the work you're doing? And why don't we bring that to life for the people who are listening and watching?
Okay, so yeah, 2025 and 2026, Alero has some exciting stuff coming out. We have our clinical mobility solution, which is going to bring alarms onto a mobile device for nurse call and things like that. And it also has analytics, on it as well. So in the same device, in the same application, you're going to get your alarms, you're going to get analytics, you're going to get being able to click into things, interact with alarms and things like that. And then on top of that, we also have active fall prevention, which is integrated into the same application and is aimed at drastically reducing falls and uses AI to detect falls and create alarms and things like that. And tying into that analytics and having all of that on the same device, we think is really going to be a game changer for clinical staff.
Yeah, so it becomes an intersection between, we know a lot about what actually happens at the bedside in the room, and we're able to take that, distill that knowledge and understand the workflow and the user experience of that and build it into a set of applications that are very practical for the caregivers. And then just to sort of bring a little bit of that to life for the people who are listening and watching, using ambient room sensing technology to pay attention to the patient's movements and to not just watch them, but also to be able to use the predictive capabilities of that technology to allow us to get to a patient before they actually fall, as an example. So thanks, Dan. It's been great chatting with you. And we look forward to bringing you back and talking about some more things that you're working on.
Alrighty. Thanks, Kenny.
Thanks so much for joining us today on CarePoints. I encourage you to hit the like button and subscribe so that you can get notified when we release our next episodes. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting service, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, whatever your favorite platform is. And make sure to visit us on the web at www.lonestarcom.com/podcast. That's www.lonestarcom.com/podcast. You'll find all of our old episodes there. Thanks so much for listening, and looking forward to having you back soon.